Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for this press conference. Today we have Howard President, Dr. Wayne Frederick, as well as MEAC Commissioner, Dr. Dennis Thomas. At this time, we will take questions after an open statement from Dr. Frederick, and we're asking individuals, if you're asking a question, to use the raise your hand function in the participant window. And at that time, we ask you to state your name and your affiliation before you ask your questions. At this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Frederick.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. First, let me just express my appreciation for all of you joining us on such short notice, especially all the members of the media. As challenging as these times have been for all of us in higher education, we know that it has been for you as well. And as you continue to report on ever-changing athletics events affected by COVID-19 pandemic, we certainly thank you for your dedication to what you're doing. For a few months now, we've been closely monitoring the continued escalation of this global health crisis, especially here along the eastern seaboard, where several states in the footprint of the MEAC, which would include Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Washington, D.C., are seeing an increase in COVID-19 cases as we're speaking today. The data is showing that more than half of the country is trending upwards again in coronavirus cases. And that news certainly is not good news for all of us. In some parts of the country, there are increased hospitalizations, and unfortunately, we're beginning to see increased deaths as well. So after a careful analysis of the data and after consultations with our conferences, presidents, chancellors, athletic administrators, campus medical staff, and the conference office, a decision was made this morning to suspend all sports competitions for the 2024 semester. This action was made solely to safeguard the mental and physical health and safety of our student athletes, coaches, athletic staffs, and fans. In the weeks and months to come, we will continue to monitor and review data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, as well as state health and medical agencies to determine our next course of action as it pertains to our suspended 2024 sports. Now, let me open it up for questions for myself or Commissioner Thomas to address.
Once again, if you would like to ask a question, we ask that you use the raise your hand function in the participant window, and after which time, please state your name and your affiliation and who's the question directed at, and we'll take questions at this time.
Mr. Williams, a couple of people are asking if they can record, and so if you can provide them guidance.
Yes, I've assigned you all permission to record if you requested it.
You send it to me and both.
All right. And the first question is from Eric.
Yes, good afternoon, Eric Fisher, Sport Business. Appreciate you setting this up, and certainly can understand the rationale behind the decision from a health and safety standpoint. But if you could sort of speak to this from a financial standpoint, obviously a lot of college sports are under stress right now, but given where you guys are at and not having the media revenue that some of the Power Five may be enjoying, if you could again speak to what this sort of means to the conference from a financial impact and what that might mean for sponsoring sports and some of the potential long-range impacts.
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you. The decision was undertaken without any consideration really for the financial impact in terms of what that would mean for us. That's an analysis that we all are going to have to conduct over the course of the next few days and be able to answer your question more fully in terms of what it means. Health and safety was a primary driver and to be quite honest, the only driver. And so we kept that foremost in mind. Most certainly we're going to take some type of a financial hit, but we think that the health and safety of our athletes and the staffs around them is the thing that is most important to us. And so we needed to make sure that we took care of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Williams, who's next in the queue?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Next, we have Jay Walker.
Good afternoon. Question one, obviously you guys are not having the fall sports. What's the talk? What's the likelihood of maybe having the fall sports pushed back into the spring?
Yeah, so that's something that we're going to take under consideration over the next few weeks. And the reason for that is because we all have to see, I think, what happens with respect to reopening. And because of the rising cases, we did not want to put the athletes in a circumstance where we couldn't give them something definitive. So until we have enough information to be able to make that decision, we felt it was important to delay making any decision that would move it to the spring and to just start with a complete suspension of the fall and come back once we have better data and more of an experience, quite frankly, as a country over the next few weeks in order to be able to make that decision.
How did the conference address the eligibility for those students that had their spring semester sports cut last year? Did the conference give them another year of eligibility? I know the NCAA really left it up to the conferences. So what did the MEAC do last spring with those eligibilities? And if we don't have a football season at all in the spring, how do you anticipate addressing eligibility issues there?
Yeah, I'll let the commissioner take that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Frederick. Before I answer your question, Jay, I want to just let the group know that Dr. Frederick is the chair of the Council of Presidents and Chancellors and also a practicing physician. So he's acutely aware of the COVID-19 pandemic. Jay, the conference and institutions will be or have granted eligibility for those who requested student athletes from the spring semester. We will be engaging with the NCAA to have a similar decision for the fall sports. So we've already making that request, and we have discussed it internally as a conference. And so we think that, well, we know that student athletes at least deserve an opportunity retain an additional year of eligibility.
Thank you, Commissioner. My last question, if I may, Mr. Dr. President Frederick H.U. Bison, how much of this decision were the other presidents inclined when you hear the numbers about North Carolina A&T had some students test positive, Florida A&M had some students test positive? Did that go into your decision-making to say, we're not going to wait to see other schools have other positive test results?
And I'm sorry, if you can just repeat that again.
Sure. I was saying, what happened in North Carolina A&T and Florida A&M, where those are two schools that had students on campus that came back with positive test results for the virus. Did that go into your thinking in terms of a medical background? Why wait to have more students get affected when we know the direction this is going?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll be honest. We take all things into consideration, and whether or not they had students who were positive, even if we did not have a single athlete who had tested positive, I think we still would have arrived at this decision based on what's happening nationally. You have rising cases. For a couple of weeks, we had rising cases throughout the country, especially in part of our footprint, but without rising hospitalizations or rising deaths. And over the course of the past 10 days, we've now had rising hospitalizations. In Florida in particular, you now have a healthcare system that's getting stretched. And unfortunately, over the past 4 or 5 days, we've had a rise in, starting to have a rise in deaths. And we have to remember that most of our athletes are young, healthy people. So they're getting infected is really probably is not going to compromise their health. Yes, some of our athletes have diabetes and other comorbidities like asthma, and so there is some risk. But the bigger risk is to the broader population around them if they begin to play competitively and have to interact with one another, et cetera. You have coaches and other staff members who, in turn, by multiple effects, can be taking that back to even a broader community. And as we all look at even reopening our universities in general, this is one aspect where we know there's high contact, high transmittability because of all of the contact that's involved in college athletics. And therefore, there's almost no way for us to guarantee that. And I think with those rising cases in general, we just didn't feel that it's something that we could do safely. And I think the ADs and the medical advisory committee did a good job of analyzing all the data, including the positive test from those two institutions. But that I don't want anyone to leave here feeling that this was primarily because of that. That was one in multiple factors. That was a very thoughtful process.
All right, thank you so much.
Jay, I just want to follow up on that. Morgan State did bring back some student athletes as well. I think it's at the beginning, around the 15th of July as well.
Do you anticipate any other conferences moving in this direction, Commissioner?
Yeah, I think it's, to answer the question, yes. And I think that most conferences are waiting and see attitude in reference to this pandemic. And I have to applaud our forecasting committee, which we developed back in March. And their charge was to continuously analyze and evaluate the situation, present options and recommendations ultimately to the Council of Presidents and Chancellors. And they've done a magnificent job of that as well. And they forwarded recommendations to our council members. And the council thought that this was the right thing to do for, as Dr. Frederick has indicated, the mental health and physical health and safety of our student athletes. But I think at the end of the month, July, I think you'll see other conferences deciding several things. One, to play or not, or suspend the fall semester, or reduce to a conference-only schedule, because travel plays a significant part in that. And hopefully those will be bus trips. And then you have an option to decide whether or not to play in the spring semester, move some of the fall, or if not all of the fall sports, to the spring semester.
Thank you.
Our next questions come from Mark Armstrong, excuse me.
Yeah, I'm from ABC down here in the Triangle, and obviously we've got Duke State and North Carolina. They're all proceeding as though they're going to have a season. Was any part of the consideration towards this decision not being able to have kind of the safety infrastructure in place to bring back athletes and keep them in a sanitary and safe environment at all?
Yeah, that's certainly a part of it. I mean, as I said last time we were on, and some of these questions came up. If you look at what's happening in pro sports, starting with the English Premier League and the other European soccer leagues, there's a very insulated environment with heavy testing, lots of use of resources and infrastructure. And then when you look at pro sports here, what the NBA is doing currently, what the PGA Tour is doing, again, lots of infrastructure that needs to be put in place. In all of those circumstances, that bubble that has been created really excludes everybody else, including fans. On our university campuses, that's going to be difficult to replicate. And I think that recognition of not just the resources that are going to be required, but the exposure level and how much higher it is would make it difficult. And those are decisions that we're making in terms of trying to bring students back. And this is one of the things that could help limit what type of stress it would put on institutions as they try to bring students back. And I recognize that, yes, some of these sports can be played without fans, and that would be perfectly acceptable, but these students are still going to have to go back and go to class and interact, to some extent with the rest of the campus, and we felt that would put the student athletes, at risk.
Mark, I would like to just piggyback on what Dr. Frederick indicated. As you know, some, if not all, A5 institutions have brought students, athletes back. And I don't know, I could be mistaken, but I don't know if there's one that had no positives completely since they brought them back. So, in most objective people's minds, they understand that there will be positive tests and what those exposures entail.
Stephen Gaither, HBCU Game Day here. Just wanted to, obviously you talked about the student athletes and that they were at the first and foremost of this decision. But obviously there are other things that come into play. You're canceling your season or postponing your season, so that affects games like the MEAC SWAC Challenge and the Celebration Bowl as well. What have the discussions been like, with ESPN and the TV partners? Because you guys don't have the P5 type television deals, but you do have some big games that will impact not only you guys, but the SWAC as well.
Yes. Yes, thank you. We've been in contact with our media partners, ESPN, which has been tremendous over the years, really since 2005. And ESPN will be making an announcement this afternoon as well, relative to the MEAC SWAC Challenge that's played for the last 15 years on ESPN2 on the Sunday before Labor Day. And the Celebration Bowl, both of those activities will be canceled. And so obviously we're disappointed, but again, we're dealing with unprecedented and uncharted territories here. There's no playbook for this. There is a playbook for the next pandemic. Hopefully there won't be. But those are decisions, hard decisions that people in higher education around the world and athletics have to make.
Okay. Our next question comes from Charles Walker.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm from the Baltimore Sun. Just want to ask, I know you guys are already dealing with the loss of some schools from the conference. Is there a concern that the loss of revenue, which you've already addressed, could destabilize the conference at a time when you're already dealing with some big picture issues?
Yeah, so I'll start with that. I'm sure the commissioner wants to weigh in on this. The conference is in pretty good, stable condition financially. Any hit, is one that we want to avoid, any decrease in revenue. But for all intents and purposes, the things that the conference needs to do and the revenues that we have coming in, we've been looking at the budget very closely and making adjustments as is necessary. And we feel comfortable with where we are. With respect to that, this is not ideal, but I just want to re-emphasize that the financial considerations, however dire they may be as a result of the decision that we made, certainly is secondary to the health and safety of everybody involved. And so we're going to continue to, make those tough decisions irrespective of the financial circumstances. We'll do everything possible to mitigate the financial losses, but the reality is that the health and safety issues are the primary things that we need to be focused on.
Yes. In addition to that, the conference, for FCS conference, the conference has had 18 consecutive years of end of the year financial distribution to our member institutions. So we have planned. We didn't expect a pandemic to show up, but we had planned to. Obviously, we have reserves in place as well, and so we were able to, due to our frugal financial policies, we're able to maintain our solvency moving forward, and we're very pleased with that. Obviously, we should have an announcement, if not tomorrow, no later than Tuesday of next week, indicating that the conference sent end of the year financial distributions to our member institutions during this pandemic. So that bodes well for where we are from a financial standpoint.
All right, thank you both.
Our next question will come from Elisa Ray.
Yeah, thank you. This one's for the commissioner. I know you've been with this league for a long time, and obviously this decision was really hard to get to, and I know it's disappointing. What was your reaction when you finally came to the realization that you really had no choice in the matter but to suspend fall sports here?
Well, Alicia, this is not a one-day decision. This was a decision that's been really monitored since the end of March, not only as a commissioner, but as a conference. The presidents and chancellors, the directors of athletics, all of us coaches have been having meetings, weekly meetings, and the forecast committee has been involved with this as well. So the picture really became very clear in terms of the direction that we should recommend to our presidents and chancellors. And it was a very arduous decision, but it was the right decision based upon the facts that we have today. And all of you know that April 15th, June 15th looks different from July 15th. So, and probably August 15th will look different from July 15th. That's just the nature of the pandemic. And I just think that the public plays a huge role in reference to overcoming this adversity and adhering to the CDC standards, particularly wearing masks, face masks.
Okay, our next question comes from Mr. Luke Williams.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Luke Williams from the Black College Sports page. Dr. Thomas and Dr. Frederick, in your press release, you said the conference plans to proceed with winter sports competitions as scheduled unless health and medical professionals advise. Can you tell us which are the winter sports, and what about the winter sports that begin, and once you tell me which ones are the winter sports, the ones that begin and are played basically in the fall, like beginning in November, what effect will it have on those? Particularly, I'm thinking about basketball, but first, what are the quote unquote winter sports?
Well, first, obviously, men and women's basketball and indoor track as well, women's bowling, and the sports that we sponsor are those winter sports: men and women's basketball, women's bowling, and indoor track and field. So that's where we are. And obviously we will continue to monitor the data and monitor how the pandemic landscape is. Luke, I think that we have to be cognizant of is that what the predictive infectious disease expert has indicated, and that is during the flu season, which will obviously in November, December, whatever those months are, and the pandemic at the same time will have a devastating effect on our country. So most, if not all of our institutions have decided to end the fall semester the week before or the week of Thanksgiving. Because of what's been predicted for the winter months.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is those sports that you mentioned, men's and women's basketball, men's and women's indoor track, as well as bowling, if they are conducted in what amounts to, or begin at least in the fall months, why not make a decision about them also? Because all other athletic competition for what you would deem fall sports, which would go through. I'm supposing that that's going through the end of the what we call the fall semester. Why not go ahead and cancel those? For example, primarily non-conference basketball games, for example, that would occur in November and December. Is that under consideration, or are you basically saying that you're going to continue to monitor that to make that kind of decision?
Yes, Luke, it's too early to make a decision on the winter sports. And I don't think it would be wise of us to make that kind of decision at this point in time. So I think we are taking the prudent route, if you will, in assessing where the pandemic will be headed, and we have some time to review it. And I think our presidents have made a statement in that effect, is that in the coming weeks and months, when we feel that it is realistic for us to make a statement one way or the other, whether we will continue with the winter sports or whether or not we will need to make some adjustments to it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
Our next question comes from Mr. Eric Moore. Mr. Moore? I don't think I think I lost him. Then we'll go to Mr. J.B. Ricks.
Good afternoon. This question is for Dr. Thomas. Thanks for taking out time on this. I'm J.B. Ricks with Spectrum News 1, by the way. My question is, how much communication did you have with the other presidents within the league? And was there any resistance, if any at all, to the cancellation of fall sports? And how will you use that when it comes to making the decision for winter sports and spring sports and beyond?
Well, we were in constant contact with the presidents and chancellors since March, and updating the presidents and chancellors as to the status of the summer workouts, the status of the fall semester as well. So it was a collaborative communication from all constituent groups. From the ADs to the presidents to the chancellors to senior women's administrators to the coaches to the medical community. We had a health and medical advisory group that was involved in making recommendations to the council of presidents as well. So it was a robust discussion regarding the course of action we should take. And ultimately, it was a unanimous decision.
Next question comes from Dr. Clavell.
Thank you, Maurice Williams, for allowing me to enter in the dialogue. And I want to say thank you for the MEAC for having us for this conference. This question is for President Dr. Wayne Frederick and Commissioner Dr. Dennis Thomas. You alluded to in an earlier question in regards to this framework of a potential bubble and how that would be challenging and difficult from higher education perspective. With that inclusiveness in regards to college athletes and the general student population, if you would, how much is that involved in regards to the provost at the academic institution be involved in this decision in any way? I know we tend to look at athletics just from the athletic lens, and we're of the position where oftentimes athletic directors or VPs of athletics are inclusive into the president's leadership cabinet. You have the faculty athletic representative in regards to the NCA and MEAC conference framework. But inclusiveness, how much, if any, does the provost academic person of the institution get involved in the general framework and specifically with the COVID-19 moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the hallmarks of the MEAC is that we have student athletes. All of our universities in the MEAC, I think, do a great job of giving students an opportunity to get an education. At Howard, 80% of our athletes graduate. So we are in the business of education first and foremost. We don't want them to come here and think that it's a hobby. We want them to compete, but we have to recognize that they're here to get a medical education. So everything that we do, we take into consideration the academic aspect of what must take place. The reopening plans for all of the institutions are heavily guided by the academic needs for the entire campus. And so any decision that we make takes that into consideration. The forecasting committee, is a committee that is made up of several different types of administrators, but also includes faculty who advise us about what we should do. And so that has been a critical part of the MEAC setup from day one, and definitely during this process has been a critical part of all our decision making. There's no college sports without the academic aspect of what we do, and that must always take precedent. And I'm very proud of the fact that that's one of the things, and I think I said this last time we met, that unfortunately there's not enough press about in terms of what we do in the MEAC for the Black athlete. And hopefully with some of what's taking place in our country, there will be an appreciation for the MEAC and for the Black athlete in an academic environment such as the MEAC as we go forward.
Thank you. Dr. Thomas, if you follow up on that in terms of the FARs, as we call it, faculty athletic representative, did they have any interchange in regards to the group discussion from the athletic directors, VP of athletics, presidents, chancellors, all those individuals involved, and I guess the senior women administrators for that factor as well?
Yes. Obviously, we have what we call a delegate assembly. And the delegate assembly is composed of all the MEAC directors of athletics, the senior women administrators, and faculty athletic representatives. And they play an integral role in the management of the MEAC. Matter of fact, the faculty athletic representative serves as the president of the delegate assembly of the MEAC. So obviously, the academic component plays a huge role. And I just want to augment to Dr. Frederick, it's about academics. That's why we're in the business. No one wants to win more than we want to win. The MEAC wants to win. But the bottom line is preparing our students to receive their degrees and be productive citizens for our society. That's why we are in the business. And that's why the student athlete mental health and physical health and safety is paramount. And it doesn't take a back seat to anything. So, and I'm proud, and the MEAC is proud of that fact.
Thank you, gentlemen, for answering and entertaining that question.
Good question.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions at this time? We have time for about one more question. If not, once again, I want to thank everyone for your time, and I'm going to give Dr. Frederick and Dr. Thomas a chance to give some closing comments.
Yeah, as we said last time, we had a press conference. There's a lot of moving parts here, lots of changes taking place. We're going to continue to try to do what's in the best interest of our entire institution. So I know we spoke about the student athletes, but I don't want it to be lost that they're guided by faculty, coaches. There's a lot of staff around our athletics departments. So we have to recognize that the ecosystem that we bring them into is one that involves a lot of people, and one that we want to preserve, be respectful of, and one that we certainly, I know in the MEAC, hold in high regard. So this is not a simple decision. We recognize the ripple effect that it has. We also recognize the place that sports plays in college life as well, and that not having that in the fall is difficult. You have a freshman class coming in who did not get to participate in commencement in the traditional way, and now they'll, for those of them who are enrolling in our institutions, will not get to see sports their fall semester of their freshman year. And we recognize all of the ripple effect of that. But at the end of the day, we have to underscore the importance of the health and the safety. So I appreciate your continued support. I can't thank Dr. Cable enough for his question. Again, I think sometimes we get lost in terms of what college sports about, and especially given the state of our country and the civil unrest, social unrest related to systemic racism. I do think the MEAC is one of the shining beacons of light in what seems to be a very, very difficult moment for the country's history. And so on the other side of this, we'll still be there shining that light brightly through the young men and women who will graduate from our institutions and having participated in sports at our institutions. So thanks again for your time and attention this afternoon.
Yes, I would like to end it by simply saying that everyone would like to have a fall season. There's no question about that. And the student athletes are impacted by this. And I think they will understand that we are putting their health and safety at the front, and that cannot be compromised, and it will not be compromised. I would also let you all know that our forecasting committee played a critical and integral role in this, and Lynn Thompson was the chair of the forecasting committee. Director of Athletics at Bethune-Cookman. Ed Scott was part of this committee, Director of Athletics at Morgan State. Dr. Scott Gines, also Delaware State Director of Athletics. And Dr. Scott from Morgan State, I didn't present his professional credentials. And Alicia Shields-Gatson is the Senior Woman Administrator at Delaware State. Sandra Booker is the Senior Women's Administrator at Bethune-Cookman. Courtney Gaucher is the Director of Athletics at Florida A&M. And Keith Davison is Director of Athletics at Maryland Eastern Shore. So that committee has worked diligently over the last 3 or 4 months to put the MEAC in the best position to make the decision that we ultimately made today. My staff, Sonia Steele, the Senior Associate Commissioner for the MEAC, was involved with this. Ray Nardito, the Assistant Commissioner for Championships, has worked diligently with this process as well. So again, I wish everyone to stay safe and healthy in the coming weeks and months. Thank you for being on the call.
Once again, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time this afternoon to join us, and ask everyone to stay safe. Have a good afternoon.